What happens if you know what you want a character to do by the end of your story, but you don't know how to make them feel real? Hajime Isayama was in this situation with Eren, at least initially. Without really intending to, he ended up writing himself into the character, specifically the part of him that wanted to see this final arc. I went through Isayama's creative process and behind the scenes details of making AoT in a previous video, including his connection with Eren. This video will cover the big updates from shortly before the end of the anime to current day. Let's dive in. Quick summary of Eren from the perspective of the creator. Isayama didn't originally have a plan for what Eren would be like on the inside. The character was just dragged along, literally and metaphorically, fulfilling whatever role the story required of him. Over time, Eren did get fleshed out, and after the time skip, he was the one driving the story. By 2019, Isayama started feeling like Eren was reflecting a part of himself that he really didn't like. When asked what character most reflects himself, I initially thought perhaps Armin, but lately, I'd say it's maybe Eren after all. Initially, I believed this type of character was necessary for the story, so I wrote him in. But actually, with him came something of a feeling that he was part of an inner me that I really didn't want to see. This feeling grew stronger as AoT reached its climax. But what we learned after the manga ended showed us the true extent of Isayama and Eren's relationship. Attack on Titan the final season, the final chapters, Special 2, airs in about 2 weeks. NHK announces an interview with Eren for later that month. Like a legit interview where the interviewer is asking questions, but this anime character would be responding. Did Isayama write lines for this? He is credited under script cooperation, but I don't know the full extent of his role. I bring this up because Yuki Kaji, Eren's voice actor, was actually involved in writing most of the lines, and at Isayama's request at that. When I received the offer, I was so intimidated I turned it down. However, later I learned that the person who wanted me to write these lines was none other than Mr. Isayama himself. After much deliberation and back and forth communication, I decided to accept the offer. I had to rely on machine translations here, but every one of them translates this as in charge. Why have a voice actor write these lines? Kaji asked the man himself. Isayama gave these 2 reasons. He wanted to blur the boundary between work and real life, and to see what he thought of Eren as someone who voiced him for 10 years. What makes this almost poetic is that Kaji's voice acting and AoT's anime adaptation in general did influence how Isayama wrote Eren in the manga. That was how he started seeing this character as an actual person rather than a tool. Kaji and the first season anime staff are a small part of Eren too. In a way, this interview kind of acted as a test to see how well Eren's VA actually knows Eren. Overall, I think the interview was good. If you found Eren's intentions and motivations confusing, this does help guide you. I can't imagine Eren ever speaking his mind as clearly as he did here, but it is fairly consistent. From jokes about saunas to nailing the tatakai. The most notable of Eren's responses in this interview is probably the answer to the question, what is freedom? Where people can carry on with everyday life without fearing for their lives. That's all I was hoping for. If I could nap under that tree, that's all I needed. That's all I wanted. No. Maybe that's not all. To me, I wasn't satisfied with just that. There was something I wanted to see, and I wanted to fight for that. I wanted to fight. That was a nice touch, an answer where Eren first makes up an excuse, but then sprinkles in a little bit of honesty. The anime finale airs, and Crunchyroll servers inevitably crash. While Isayama might have been a little nervous about the reaction to it, he was excited to see the big Titan fight. Excited enough to even contribute a little to the drawing process. Isayama already went through this whole arc of emotions surrounding the controversy of AoT's ending. Now he's going for round 2. It was with the New York Times interview that Isayama's feelings towards the ending and Eren became most apparent. First of all, how involved was Isayama with the final episode? I checked the script, but the main thing was the storyboards. There were different things I suggested, but when it comes down to it, it's really the role of the production to make those decisions. But I wanted to at least give my input so that they could take those into account when they were making the final decisions. This doesn't confirm any specific scenes, but given responses to the other questions asked, it's very likely that he offered input into every scene with different dialogue between the anime and manga. Maybe the most notable is the replacement of the dialogue where Armin thanks Eren for his actions. Isayama's original intent was to have Armin take joint responsibility here, to be an accomplice. It missed the mark, but that was the idea. But let's get into the Eren stuff. We got some comments further clarifying Eren's motivations, specifically surrounding this scene. I think that refers to the fact that Eren was dreaming of going to this world outside of the walls, where there was nobody and there was nothing. There was an excitement about this world that was just empty, a clean slate. I don't really know whether that's a good or bad thing, and I don't really know why that was the ideal I set up for Eren as part of this story. But what I can say is that when he does get across the wall at that point, he says he sees that the world is really not that different from what's within the walls, in the world that he already knows. The interviewer followed this up by asking whether Eren was really free. We're told that he had no choice but to follow the future he saw, but was this just an excuse, or was he telling the truth? So the truth is, the situation with Eren actually overlaps in a certain sense with my own story with this manga. When I first started this series, I was worried that it would probably be cancelled. It was a work that no one knew about, but I had already started the story with the ending in mind. And the story ended up being read and watched by an incredible number of people, and it led to me being given a huge power that I didn't feel quite comfortable with. It would have been nice if I could have changed the ending. Writing manga is supposed to be freeing, but if I was completely free, then I should have been able to change the ending. I could have changed it and said I wanted to go in a different direction, but the fact is that I was tied down to what I had originally envisioned when I was young. And so, manga became a very restrictive art form for me, similar to how the massive powers that Eren acquired ended up restricting him. As the ending of AoT got closer, it looks like the part of Eren Isayama could most identify with started to become his lack of freedom. But Isayama's lack of freedom was something he self-imposed. It had to go down in some specific way his younger self envisioned. The moment Isayama showed Eren that vision, these two became a team. They're now in the same situation, privy to the same game-changing knowledge. Do you defy what needs to happen? Can you defy what needs to happen? They both ultimately just move toward that thing, doubting it several times along the way. Of course, Isayama would gradually come to best identify with Eren from then on. Even their hairstyles seem to be similar a lot of the time. At Anime NYC 2022, Isayama revealed that this painting was one of the many inspirations for this series, most likely influencing the behavior of the Titans. As he mentioned, it's what inspired his early one-shot, Humanity vs. Titans. This is what I wanted to do. From the very beginning, I knew where this series would land, but details like how the main character would get there weren't determined. The influence of this painting can be seen in how the rumbling was depicted. Many aspects of it are familiar. Much like Eren, I guess he kind of had a vision for the rumbling given to him too. To end off the interview, Isayama is asked about the scene showing the future of Paradise. I guess there could have been an ending where it was a happy ending, and the war ended and everything was fine and dandy. I guess that could have been possible. At the same time, the end of fighting and the end of contention itself seems kind of hokey. It kind of seems like it's not even believable. It's just not plausible in the world we're living in right now. And so, sadly, I had to give up on that kind of happy ending. We'll never know exactly what Isayama's early vision encompassed. I don't know which parts of the last 16 chapters were developed early on and to what extent. But one thing that's very clear is that through this ending, Isayama metaphorically killed the side of him he didn't like. And he did so after spending 12 years with it, even allying himself with it. He is now outside of what he referred to as a restrictive art form for him, and I guess is free. AoT Volume 35, and the first and likely last manga art book, Shingeki Fly, released. Volume 35 isn't a conventional volume. It contains some sketches from the final chapter, and a short one-shot called Bad Boy. I'll mention a summary of Bad Boy here, so skip ahead to this point if you want to avoid spoilers. This is a nice little 18-page story that reveals a few details about Levi's childhood. Levi and his mother used to regularly drink tea together. From Levi's perspective, that was basically the only good part of his rotten early life. When his mother's belongings were stolen, namely her tea set, Levi awakened his Ackerman powers for the first time during a fight when attempting to get them back. This awakening is tied to Levi taking on that bad boy persona in the underground. We see that this happened before Kenny left him. After recovering his mother's tea set, he prepares some tea, but just as he's about to take a sip, the handle of the teacup breaks and the cup shatters. This is why Levi holds teacups the way he does. We see that he's been telling Gabby and Falco this story post chapter 139, and Gabby becomes a follower of his ways. Why did Isayama write this? He goes into those details in an interview within Shingeki Fly. I initially planned to do a story that took place 100 years before the main story. However, to depict such an episode, if there was a single discrepancy with the main story, it would not add up. So the writing didn't progress at all, partly because I had a hard time drawing it. However, the main events of the Angoulême International Comics Festival made me realize that the first thing I wanted to do was please the fans. So, instead of the original idea, I decided to turn it into a reading piece that reveals why Levi holds teacups in a strange way, which was one thing I always wanted to draw but never could. He elaborates further. When I saw that the backlash after the series ended still continued, I was worried that my creation was not progressing as I had hoped. The turning point for me was the live interview at this event. There were so many French fans watching, it felt like I was a child sitting next to the senpais at the high school. I thought, will I be boring? Will they come to this place not knowing about Attack on Titan? So, when I was speaking during this live interview, I noticed that some people were disillusioned because the manga had already ended. So I rethought it and said, maybe I could draw the manga again. And that's when people's faces lit up. This was the reason why I did Bad Boy for this art book. Isayama mentions that he got back into the flow of drawing Levi fairly easily, even though this was his first time drawing fully digital. It was fun to remember those times when the manga was serialized, while talking with my assistants about trivial matters. It seems that Bad Boy exists because Isayama wanted to write something for the fans. It's very different from the I write what I want to write mindset we've known the young Isayama to take. It does seem like a big part of this is because he is weary of more controversy and backlash, but Isayama's also gone through a lot of lifestyle changes. Before I got married, I lived like a recluse, locking myself in my room working on Attack on Titan day and night. But after marriage, I've corrected myself to a lifestyle where I get up in the morning and go to bed at night, and I live a human-paced life, cooking dinner and cleaning the bathroom. Now I can control nutrition through food, and my life expectancy has probably increased by 10 to 20 years. Isayama still maintains many of his old hobbies. He mentions he's been reading a lot of manga and highlights Blue Giant by Shinichi Ishizuka, but he's also picked up outdoor hobbies. He plays in the ocean and does something that sounds a lot like paddleboarding the way it's described. He's even been traveling a lot more, and credits a lot of this to his wife, literally saying that she helped him regain his humanity. Shingeki Fly contains a second interview featuring Isayama and Yukari Nakao, the colorist for Attack on Titan. This goes into a lot of detail about some of their favorite and most iconic volume covers, but I'll just mention my own favorite insight we gained here. It's related to volume 34's cover. I thought about, what if there were no walls? My guess is that if there were no Titans in the world, Eren, Reiner, and the others would all be playing together. In the main story, there is a line from Armin that says, "The three of us ran towards the tree on a hill at sunset." I would have liked to show that in color. I also wanted the readers to feel, this is the first time I've seen this scene, but somehow I recognize it when they read the main story. It looks like Isayama won't be leaving manga altogether just yet. He's actually working on a spin-off manga called Soyogi Fractal, based on Kaji's vocal synth avatar, Soyogi Soyogi. It's a one-shot meant to celebrate Kaji's 20th anniversary as a voice actor. Kaji invited Isayama to work on this project, though Isayama's role is primarily on the storyboard. Other people will handle drawing, and Kaji leads the writing. I think Isayama's growing past Eren. He's not a completely different person from who he was 14 years ago, but I think his outlook on life has shifted slightly. Isayama is still pessimistic. He still stands by peace just not being possible today. Attack on Titan will always remain a part of him. But in 10 years, I'm not sure if this guy would be in a state where he could create another story like Attack on Titan. I guess that's a sign he's doing better. For full context, see the prequel video here. I cover more mangakas in depth on this channel, so check those out and stay tuned.